Yo, what it do, YouTube? It's your boy Matt Omega, back with another video. This time, we're zeroed in on Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, or I guess what I should call it instead, Suicide Squad Kill the Good Press surrounding your game, because this game, prior to its release, has gone through some of the worst press and narratives I've seen in years, to the point where I wouldn't be surprised if Rocksteady had financial issues stemming directly from bad initial sales. But why was the press so terrible? And is this game actually even that bad? Let's talk about it. Suicide Squad off the rip is a live service co-op looter shooter that seems like it takes the most inspiration from Crackdown and games like it. You can feel a little Sunset Overdrive in the verticality of the game and its environments, and I personally believe that what Suicide Squad borrows from the games in that genre is actually pretty freaking good. To start with gameplay, you begin as one of 4 supervillains with an asterisk on the super, since King Shark is the only one with powers, that borrow traversal tech from pre-existing DC characters to get around the map and to get elite positioning during combat. Combat generally plays out with enemies on varying levels of elevation surrounding you, taking unlimited pot shots at you unless you actually— I just hit the mic. Combat generally plays out with enemies on varying levels of elevation surrounding you, taking unlimited pot shots at you unless you actually start moving, giving the game less of the Borderlands effect where it can feel like you're just kind of unloading on enemies without too much movement. And this is where I think the game shines. The need for constant repositioning and fast movement and reflexes to perform counters, in addition to all the other layers of combat, all play together especially well in conjunction with the combo meter. Good knowledge of the shield harvesting mechanics for your character also make the game the most run and gun friendly looter shooter I've ever had the pleasure of playing. Your shield doesn't replenish on its own like it would in cover for a lot of other games, so it almost turns into a game within a game of running, gunning, and then performing the actions necessary to get your shield back and continue wreaking havoc on enemies. Early game, when the options were kind of bare bones and nothing was unlocked like with a lot of games, and I stand by the idea that pieces of entertainment need to stop doing this, the combat was kind of boring. I actually played the game myself during the beta, and even I thought it was initially pretty boring. Then about 2/3 of the way through the actual game, in the skill tree, I unlocked 3 mid-combat abilities and decided how I wanted to play the game. As a bomber for Deadshot, I went from running around like a headless chicken to raining death down on my enemies like someone just called in a B-32 bomber. All of this made for some pretty outstanding combat in its genre with some decent hidden depth. While I did play most of the game on its normal difficulty, I could see the game being way harder for its endgame content without necessarily being unfair or having artificial difficulty. Speaking of, no bullet sponges in the game. Yes, you heard it here first, folks. I was killing 2 to 5 enemies per clip by the end of the game as long as I was accurate, and to be honest, that's less bullets than it would normally take in freaking Call of Duty, so I think they struck the right balance for difficulty. Of course, all of these positives wouldn't mean much at all if the story was as. And guess what? Is someone lending something, bro? I'm about to end my life. Bro, I can hear the magic bullet going off. Yeah, I think they done, bro. Of course, all these positives wouldn't mean much at all if the story was as. And guess what? It wasn't. Now, I don't want to make a spoiler-heavy review, but I'm gonna let you know right now, I might be saying some stuff you might not want to hear, so click off. Alright, let's go. The name of the game is your goal, and the actual game's progression story-wise is completely based around that goal, with even your side missions being a means to upgrade the items you will end up using in the final boss battle against Brainiac. I call them side missions, but realistically, they're just open-world fluff that give you viable upgrades. And I do knock points off for not having real side missions, since the DC world has such a rich lore available. In regards to actual story though, it's a great team building adventure with really memorable personalities and a lot of memorable moments. Your main characters of Suicide Squad are tasked with killing 4 members of the Justice League and stopping Brainiac's invasion, while 3 of the 4 are completely normal humans, albeit skilled. Since you're all human and are being forced to fight literal demigods, you go around Metropolis recruiting engineers to make you the gear required to actually do damage to the superheroes, and surprise surprise, you kill them. Before the game's release, there were a lot of people pissed off about that fact, and to those people, grow up. Yes, Arkham Batman died in a way you didn't like, and unfortunately, Kevin Conroy, rest in peace, passed away a little prior to the game's release. But the game had been in development for years, and Kevin Conroy would not have taken the Batman role if he did not like the script. You are crying over nothing and are disrespecting a role he likely took pride in doing. There weren't too many opportunities prior to this to play a Batman that was evil at all, so stop virtue signaling something that literally doesn't require it. And for those who complain that it sucks this is how Arkham Batman died, oh well dog, go pick up a comic. Batman is still alive in those and in 20,000 other things. But I digress. The story is solid, and while it does start to feel a little drawn out at certain points, the main game story is done in like 15 hours. All of the story cutscenes are pretty good looking too, especially because the characters are so damn detailed. And this takes me straight into graphics, another point of contest. Truthfully, the game isn't the most pretty thing out there, and some of what people liked about Arkham is missing, but that isn't because of an inherent downgrade, it's because the environment and game's progression is different overall. Metropolis is an entirely different city with entirely different weather, and the game has a time and day system. It's not raining 24/7, and it can become daytime or nighttime. A lot of Arkham Knight's visual weaknesses were well hidden by the overall darker tone of the game and the fact that it rained all the time. Rain in games generally tends to make them look better because it makes surfaces appear more reflective and shiny, and it has a lot of blemishes. But in this case, it doesn't mean the game took a step back graphically. The art direction for Arkham Knight was absolutely better, but the level of detail in Suicide Squad is insane. The city is incredibly deliberate in its construction and jam-packed with micro detail in textures and places you wouldn't expect it. However, it's something you only notice after playing the game. So Suicide Squad's graphics aren't that bad, the gameplay is pretty good, and the story is pretty good. So why am I rating it a 7 out of 10? Well, we do have some issues. For one, while the game does a decent job of trying to give you different enemies to fight, like a brute that shoots mortar shots, or enemies imbued with Speed Force energy, they're all from the same faction and all carry the same design sensibility because of it. A looter shooter is only as good as the enemies that you endlessly shoot at, and if there isn't enough to break up the monotony, people will get bored of your game. It just is what it is. Granted, the game's relatively short runtime made it so I only just barely started getting tired of seeing mortar guy or flying helicopter, but knocked off a point regardless. Another point goes to how long it took the game to wind up. Do not put a damn skill tree in your game until the early game gameplay is fun. I don't care. You will lose people off a damn beta like that. It's just not smart. The last point comes off for the game's PC performance. There's really no reason why in a game with no street NPCs, no cars, literally just enemies and vibes, is running like as on my 5800X and RTX 37. Both them parts is just one generation behind current, and I was over here with my settings on medium and not getting a lock 60 with DLSS on. Low barely netted me a lock 60 and I still kept stuttering. Beyond those points though, I do think if you're the type that likes live service games and looter shooters, and even if you don't like those games but enjoy co-op, there is a ton of fun for you here, especially in co-op, as there aren't too many games in an open world like this where you can grab your friends and just go crazy in the way the game lets you. The criticisms surrounding this game are frankly unfair and unfounded. I actually mentioned Suicide Squad on the video I dropped last month about live service games and why they're almost always terrible, so to see it go through all these criticisms that aren't actually criticisms is kinda insane. The live service elements for the duration of the actual story are minimal, and honestly, you can ignore the looting aspect and skill tree aspect almost entirely because the game comes with an auto equip option, meaning you don't even have to pay attention to it. There is a lot to enjoy here, and I can't say enough about the gameplay and characters. So for me, 7 out of 10, too much water. This has been Matt Omega. Peace.